All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving headfirst into a real sci-fi classic.
Ooh, sounds exciting.
It is. We're talking RoboCop, the one from 1987.
Ah, a true masterpiece. Still holds up incredibly well, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And we've got this super detailed review here, which, let me tell you, goes way deeper than just the robots and explosions.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, get this. We're talking corporate conspiracies. We've got a cyborg straight up grappling with what it even means to be human.
That's a heavy one, right? What makes us U.S.?
And all of this is happening in a dystopian Detroit that feels, well, maybe a little too real these days.
Yeah, you're right. Those themes hit different now. So, what's this review saying about how RoboCop tackles those big philosophical questions?
It really digs into it. Like, we start with Alex Murphy, classic good cop, totally devoted to his family.
The all-American hero, right?
And then, bam, he's brutally murdered and brought back as this high-tech law enforcement machine.
Oh, man. Talk about a rough day at the office. But I imagine he's not exactly stoked about his new cyborg life.
Not exactly. He's getting these flashes of his past, these memories that are tormenting him. It's like he can't escape who he was.
Right, and that's the core conflict, isn't it? He's programmed to obey, to be this perfect soldier, but those pieces of his past, those emotions, keep breaking through. Like the film makes you ask, what does it mean to be human? Is it our memories, our feelings?
Exactly. And you know what else? This movie doesn't pull any punches when it comes to social commentary. It's got a seriously wicked sense of humor.
Oh yeah, Verhoeven's known for that satirical edge. So how's that playing out in RoboCop?
Well, the review points out that all the over-the-top violence, it's not just there for shock value. It's like a reflection of a world that's become totally numb to brutality.
That's a scary thought. And one that feels super relevant today. Like, we're bombarded with so much violence in the media, it's hard to even process it all.
Right. And it all goes down in this decaying, crime-ridden Detroit, which is basically controlled by this mega corporation, Omni Consumer Products, or OCP.
OCP. They're not just some faceless company in this film. They feel like a statement about corporate power today. Like how companies spin things, how much influence they have.
Totally. It's giving me major too big to fail vibes, especially when OCP decides to just, bulldoze Detroit and build this shiny new Delta City on top of it. Kind of like what happens with gentrification in so many cities, right?
Absolutely. Developers promise progress, but who really ends up benefiting? Who gets pushed out in the process? It's that classic tale of corporate greed winning out over people's lives. And the media, oh, they're right there in the mix too, feeding the public whatever narrative fits the agenda. So how does the review tackle the whole look and feel of RoboCop? Because visually, it's stunning.
Oh, yeah, we got to talk visuals. That iconic silver armor, the way he moves, it's badass, but it's also kind of tragic. And then there's ED-209, that clunky stop-motion enforcement droid.
Uh-huh. ED-209, what a gloriously bad design. They could have made the animation smoother, even back then, but there's something about that jerky movement that makes it even scarier.
It's like they're saying, look, this thing is flawed, like satirizing all this over-engineered military tech that's supposed to be perfect, but ends up causing more problems.
Oh, totally. And that scene where it malfunctions during the presentation, hilarious and horrifying all at once. Classic Verhoeven, blending satire and action so seamlessly.
Oh, it's brilliant. And speaking of brilliant, can we talk about Basil Poldura's score for a sec?
Please do. That music is epic. It's so much more than just background noise. It's like another character in the story.
Exactly. That main theme, you hear it, and instantly you know it's RoboCop. It's powerful, emotional, and it perfectly captures the struggle he's going through.
It elevates those key emotional moments, doesn't it? Murphy's internal conflict, that dystopian atmosphere, the triumphs, the defeats. The music makes you feel it all so deeply.
Man, that score is just, it's something else. It makes you think, though, why does RoboCop still feel so relevant? It came out decades ago. But
It's crazy, right? It's like it's talking about our world today. I think that's the mark of truly great science fiction.
Yeah.
It's like it holds up this mirror to society, and sometimes what we see, well, it's pretty unsettling, even decades later.
Yeah, for sure. The review talks about how RoboCop doesn't shy away from those big issues. Like, you've got Detroit, it's decaying, crime everywhere, corporations calling all the shots. It's bleak, almost like a warning.
It is. And Verhoeven, the director, he uses satire so brilliantly to highlight just how absurd it all is. Like those fake commercials they show throughout the film. On the surface, they're hilarious, but underneath...
Oh, tell me about it. The commercials are the best. That one for the Nukem board game, where it's kids playing nuclear war.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's so over the top, so ridiculous, but it makes you think, about how Violence is kind of just marketed to us,
Yeah.
made to seem normal.
It is. It's a commentary on how we've become so desensitized to it all.
Yeah.
Not just the commercials either. Look at how the media is portrayed in the film.
Mm-hmm.
They're obsessed with sensationalizing crime,
Hmm.
creating this constant fear, this paranoia.
Yeah, they're practically part of the problem, aren't they? Like they're profiting off of the chaos. It makes you wonder how much of the news we see is actually informing us and how much is just playing with our emotions.
Right. It's scary stuff.
Mm.
Verhoeven's showing us just how easily we can be manipulated, especially when it comes to things like crime and safety. And then there's that whole aspect of privatized law enforcement, with OCP basically controlling the police.
Yeah, they're not even hiding it. It's straight up saying, hey, corporations, they can police themselves. And RoboCop, he's their tool, their weapon. It's like a symbol of power and control.
Makes me think about all the debates going on right now about police militarization, surveillance technology. Yeah, it's more relevant now than ever.
Yes.
Where do we draw the line between keeping people safe and corporate interests? RoboCop throws that question right in our face, and I think that's why the movie still packs such a punch. It's not just entertainment, it's a statement, a social commentary that's just as powerful today.
It really is.
And, it's not just what it's saying, it's how it's saying it. Visually, Verhoeven's direction is incredible. He creates this world that's so gritty and real, but then he throws in these over-the-top action sequences. It's like this unique blend that's both captivating and kind of disturbing.
Oh, the action is brutal. Not for the faint of heart, but man, those sequences are intense. So well choreographed.
And that violence, it's intentional. It's not just there to be gratuitous. It's meant to shock us, to make us uncomfortable, to make us see the ugliness of violence, the real consequences.
There's this one scene, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but Murphy, as RoboCop, he confronts the guys who killed him. And the way it's shot, the slow motion, the blood, it's like a ballet of violence, but so disturbing at the same time.
Exactly. Verhoeven's making a point. He's forcing us to confront that ugliness head on. And it's not just the physical violence either. There's that underlying psychological violence.
Yeah, like how Murphy, he's stripped of his identity and turned into, well, a product branded with that OCP logo. It's dehumanizing.
It is. And yet there's still that glimmer of hope in RoboCop, that flicker of humanity that just refuses to be extinguished. You see Murphy fighting to reclaim his past, to break free from his programming, to choose for himself.
That's what makes his journey so powerful. He's more than just a machine. He's a man trapped inside this machine, trying to hold on to who he is in a world that wants to erase him. And there are moments you see flashes of his humanity, of compassion, even in all that chaos.
Right, like that scene where he protects that little girl from the gang members.
Yeah.
It's small, but it's so powerful. Even as a robot, he's capable of empathy, of caring for others.
And that's why RoboCop is so much more than just an action flick. It's about identity, about the strength of the human spirit. It's about fighting for justice in a world that's lost its way.
And it's a warning about the dangers of letting corporations and technology take over. It's saying we need to be careful about the choices we make, about the world we're building, and the consequences that come with it.
It's wild, right? You've got all this action, all this satire, but RoboCop still manages to hit you right in the feels. There's a real heart to it, It's more than just the cool stuff.
Oh, yeah. RoboCop is working on, so many levels. You've got the action, the social commentary, but then there's this whole other thing going on, exploring what it means to be human, especially when the world around you is trying to, dehumanize you.
The review talks about that a lot, the whole identity and memory thing. It's those little moments where we see glimpses of Murphy's past. That's what really gets me.
It's like these fractured memories trying to piece themselves back together. They're haunting, but they're also what keeps him grounded.
It's almost like those memories are pushing back against his programming. Like, hey, remember who you are. You had a life, a family. And I think it's those memories that ultimately drive him to want justice. Not just for the city, but for himself, too.
That's what makes his journey so powerful. He's not just blindly following orders. He's fighting to reclaim who he is, bit by bit. And I think that struggle, it resonates with everyone on some level. Trying to hold on to yourself in a world that's constantly trying to change you.
Yeah, totally. It's like that pressure to fit in, to be something you're not. RoboCop's like, hey, it's okay to fight back, to be yourself. But, it's not just Murphy's story that hits hard. The film also shows the cost of all this violence and corruption, the impact it has on regular people.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in all the action. But Verhoeven, he doesn't let us forget about those everyday folks caught in the middle, the fear, the families torn apart. And on the flip side, you see how power and greed, it just twists people, like those executives at OCP.
They're so focused on profits, on control, that they've lost any sense of empathy. It's like they're playing God with people's lives and they don't even care.
And that's where the satire comes back in. It's like, look at this. Look at how ridiculous we've become.
It's almost like he's using humor as this weapon to point out the hypocrisy, the corruption.
Yeah, but even with all that darkness, there are these moments of hope, these human connections that kind of shine through.
It's like when Murphy goes to see his old partner, Lewis. She's obviously grieving the man she knew, but she also sees something in RoboCop, something familiar. It's a really powerful scene.
It is, yeah. It's about that human connection, even when everything's been turned upside down.
So what's the takeaway here? I mean, RoboCop is this sci-fi action flick, but it's also reflecting our own world, right?
Absolutely. It's asking us to look at some uncomfortable stuff about ourselves, about the choices we make, and what happens because of those choices. Like, it's a warning about letting corporations run wild, about how technology can dehumanize us, and I think most importantly, about remembering who we are, even when the world's trying to make us forget.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about. So anyone listening who hasn't seen RoboCop, you got to check it out. It's way more than just an action movie. It'll stick with you. And if you have seen it, maybe it's time for another watch, with fresh eyes.
I think you'd be surprised how much it still has to say. That's what makes great sci-fi, right? It doesn't just entertain, it makes you think, makes you question the world around you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into RoboCop. It's been a wild ride. Thanks for being here with us.
Always a pleasure. Until next time, folks, keep asking those tough questions. Hey, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What classic are we dissecting today?
Well, we're strapping on the helmet and heading back to 1987. It's RoboCop time.
Ah, fantastic choice. A true blend of action, satire, and some seriously thought-provoking themes.
Everyone knows the story, right? But we're going beyond the surface. We dug up some behind-the-scenes facts that'll change how you see this film.
Ooh, I love these little details. They always reveal so much about the creative process.
Okay, so first things first, the RoboCop suit.
Yeah.
It's legendary. But did you know, for Peter Weller, it was more like a sweat lodge. The guy lost like 3 pounds of sweat every single day filming.
3 pounds? Wow, that's intense. You have to wonder how that impacted his performance. Talk about method acting, right?
Right. It wasn't just a costume. It was a physical challenge. So how did he even act in that thing?
Well, that's what's so fascinating. He couldn't rely on big movements or expressive facial acting because the suit was so restrictive. Think about it. RoboCop's stiff posture, that deliberate way he moves, that almost monotone voice.
It's almost like the suit created the character.
Exactly. Weller had to adapt, find ways to convey emotion through subtle gestures and vocal nuances. Limitations can breed creativity, I guess.
Totally. And speaking of casting, I read that Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the running to play RoboCop.
He was! Can you imagine? It's hard to picture anyone but Weller in the role now.
I know, right? So why didn't they go with Arnold?
Well, director Paul Verhoeven had a very specific vision for RoboCop. He felt that Schwarzenegger, while an amazing action star, was just too bulky for the suit.
Yeah, I can see that. It might have tipped the scales too far towards pure strength, right?
Yeah,
And lost that vulnerability that Weller brings to the character.
precisely. Verhoeven wanted to explore that duality, the machine and the man. Arnold's physique might have overshadowed that.
Wow, so different. And speaking of intense, RoboCop pushed the boundaries with its violence. Did you know it almost got slapped with an X rating?
Oh yeah, the violence was definitely a hot topic back then. Verhoeven had to make some edits to secure an R rating.
And that's interesting because some people argue that the violence was essential to the film's message. It was satirical, highlighting the brutality and chaos in society.
Right, it's not just mindless action. It's meant to make you uncomfortable, to force you to think about the consequences of violence.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, brace yourselves for this one. RoboCop's movements were actually inspired by samurai.
I know, right? Totally unexpected. Verhoeven wanted RoboCop's movements to have this deliberate, almost ritualistic quality. So he had Peter Weller train with a kabuki theater instructor.
Kabuki theater. Now, I'm not that familiar with it.
Oh, it's a classical form of Japanese dance drama. Very stylized, highly controlled movements, elaborate costumes.
So that's where those fluid yet robotic movements come from.
Exactly. The training gave Weller that unique posture, that blend of power and grace. It adds another layer to RoboCop, doesn't it? He's not just a machine, there's this warrior spirit underneath.
It's like a hidden meaning. And speaking of iconic, we can't forget, I'll buy that for $1.
What a line. It became a meme instantly, right?
Yeah.
A perfect encapsulation of that 80s consumerism satire.
It's funny how a throwaway line can have such an impact.
Right. And it speaks to the film's ability to tap into those deeper anxieties about society, anxieties that are still relevant today.
Absolutely. Corporate greed, urban decay, the blurred lines between man and machine. RoboCop is more than just an action film.
It really is. It's layered, it's thought-provoking. It's a film that keeps you thinking long after the credits roll. And every detail, from the suit's limitations to the samurai influence, adds to its depth.
It's amazing how much thought went into making a film that's still relevant today. And it makes you wonder, does RoboCop's exploration of violence, technology, and corporate greed feel even more relevant in today's world?
Definitely something to ponder. It might even hit differently on a rewatch knowing all this.
Totally. Well, there you have it. Another deep dive complete. What a fascinating film.
It was a pleasure as always.
Until next time, folks, keep exploring those hidden layers.
And keep those critical thinking caps on.